I want to talk about the choice that I made at the end of Mass Effect 3. I'm talking about the big choice, the ultimate decision, the one that will decide the fate of the galaxy. I want to talk about why my Commander Shepard made that decision, and indeed why it was almost certainly the only decision that he was ever going to make. And of course, it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, spoiler warning, there will be spoilers. Trust me, it does not get any more spoilery than this. Now, before we start, there are two critical things I want you to keep in mind during this discussion. The first thing I want you to keep in mind is the idea that there are pros and cons to all of the choices that you can make at the end of this game. I know some people do like to think of endings as being either good, bad, or neutral, but in this particular case, there are arguments to be made for all of the choices. You can see why some people might choose one over the other. You may have a preference, you may believe the choice you made is actually morally the better one, but there are pros and cons to each choice. More importantly, the pros and cons can change over time and indeed be completely different things. The positives and negatives of your decision right now may be different to the positives and negatives that will affect people in the future. So bear that in mind. The second thing I want you to keep in mind is the fact that Shepard did not have the luxury of time to weigh up the consequences of this decision the same way you and I do. We can spend, hours just discussing this, coming up with ideas, looking up other people's opinions, ruminating on the subject. Shepard, in that instant, did not have that luxury. He had to make a decision there and then, and every second that he delayed, hundreds if not thousands of people would die. So with those two things in mind, let's talk about this choice. The three options that you are given. And I do know there are more than 3 endings, but you are presented 3 options and you must choose one of them. Well, technically that's not true, is it? I believe it's possible to refuse to make that choice. Now, I've never actually done it, so I can't tell you how it ends, but I'm assuming badly. I'm assuming that if you don't make a choice, it just comes down to a straight military battle between the Allied fleets and the Reapers, and the Reapers are almost certainly going to win that one fairly conclusively. That is my assumption. That is what the story tends to suggest. At no point does the game give you a hint that your current fleet, as big as it can get, is ever going to be enough to just take on the Reapers. You've got this one chance. The fleet is big enough to engage the Reapers and keep them busy whilst you maneuver the Crucible into doing whatever it's supposed to do. This is it. It's the last ditch effort. It's the Hail Mary. If the Crucible doesn't work, we're doomed kind of scenario. That's how it's set up. I'm assuming that is what happens. And even if they did manage to defeat the Reapers on Earth, the Allied fleet would be devastated. It would be damaged, weakened, and almost certainly would not survive any counteroffensive by the Reapers. The Reapers have still got loads of forces all over the galaxy, whereas the Allied races, they've pretty much committed everything they can commit to this one last push. They've probably even, weakened their own homeworld defenses, hoping that this one last battle, this one last plan will save them. If it doesn't, the harvest is inevitable. The Reapers are just going to complete the cycle. At least that is how I read it. That's how it seems. The pros and cons of this decision seem pretty obvious. The con is everyone's dead. Basically, the entire galaxy gets wiped out and the cycle begins again. And I think we can all agree that's generally bad. Yeah, that's not a good thing. Pros, there are none. I mean, maybe you get some sense of satisfaction giving the middle finger to the kid, but that's going to be short-lived and little consolation to the rest of the galaxy. I don't think there are any positives long-term either. I mean, you could argue maybe we will leave behind enough information that in a future cycle they will be able to defeat the Reapers without having to make that choice. However, there's no guarantee someone in a future cycle won't make that choice anyway, and everyone you know and love will still be dead. Anyway, let's move on to the options that are actually given to you by the annoying space child, and I'm going to begin with the option that I believe is known as the destroy option. This is the one where you kill the Reapers, but you also kill all other synthetic life, so that's the Geth, and of course Edie. The pros and cons in the short term for this option are pretty self-evident. Obviously all organics are saved, so that's a big yay for them, but all synthetics are dead. And if you're playing a shepherd who hates synthetic, that would probably be a positive as well. But my shepherd had befriended Edie, befriended Legion, he'd brokered peace between the Geth and the Quarians, and he'd formed an alliance with them. They were brothers in arms, and he took that very seriously, and he was going to have to sacrifice them to save organics. He was going to have to basically, I'm not going to say stab them in the back because that's a little too, that's a bit too judgmental, but he was going to have to sacrifice them to save organics. But what are the long-term ramifications of that decision? Will future synthetics look back at that decision and be affected by it? And be under no illusion, there will be future synthetic life forms. You might say, well, the galaxy will now recognize the danger of synthetic life and outlaw artificial intelligence, and I will just giggle and laugh because it's not going to stop it from happening. It is going to happen. Someone somewhere is going to create artificial intelligence. There will be synthetic life. It is going to happen. And you're going to have to deal with the fact that they will almost certainly find out what organics did to save themselves. Could that cause problems in the future? I mean, I suspect Edie would have been okay with Shepard making that decision. She would have understood and indeed probably been, shall we say, happy because it saves Joker. The Geth, would they have understood it? I don't know. Maybe they would have thought of it as logical. Maybe they would have rationalized it. It's hard to know. But you also have to face the very real possibility that future synthetics will look at this, and whilst they may even understand it, they will take this into consideration when deciding how to deal with us. Think of the Geth and the Quarians. We now know that the Quarians were the ones that started the war with the Geth, but the Geth refused to wipe the Quarians out even when they had the option. Will future synthetics do the same? Or will they think, well, you know what? It's going to happen. We're going to end up with a war and the organics will wipe us out again. That's just how it's going to be. If we want to survive, we will have to wipe them out. Could this decision be the very thing that is used to justify the annihilation of all advanced sentient organic creatures? I don't know, but it's a very real possibility. Shepard might be destroying the current Reapers only to become the inspiration for future ones. However, if that were the only option presented other than to refuse, would the Shepard that I played have made that choice? And the answer is yes, he would. He would have sacrificed synthetic life to save organics. He would have felt terrible doing it. He would have felt like he was backstabbing his allies, betraying his friends. And even though you could argue that that is not the case, that he was just saving as many people as possible, and indeed it's the sort of argument he would have made. Think back to these conversations he had with Garrus, where he would agree with Garrus about doing something that was really quite terrible, but it was the right thing to do. Think of the fact that one of his decisions ended up destroying an entire Batarian colony, but it had to be done because the Reapers were coming. These sort of decisions that he would make, but would feel terrible about, that he could justify logically and yet did not sit right with him. If it were the only way to prevent the total annihilation of every single sentient species, if it was the only way to stop this harvest and indeed future harvests from happening, he would have made that choice. But of course it wasn't the only choice he was given.